Hi, everyone. I want to first thank Josh and Tom and Jordan for creating this workshop and also for inviting me to participate. I am Yoav Bar Anan. I'm a social psychologist from Tel Aviv University, and I'm also the director of technology in Project Implicit. What is Project Implicit? That's a non-profit organization that was founded by a few social psychologists in order to tell the public about implicit social cognition and let them experience some of the knowledge that we gained. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience that we have in running studies in social cognition online. Project Implicit has been around for more than 20 years, and I've been there in the last 14 years. One of the main theoretical constructs that we study is automatic judgment. Automatic judgment is the kind of judgment that you make very quickly. It does not require a lot of cognitive resources. It might happen unintentionally, and perhaps also it escapes awareness. And the way that we investigate automatic judgment is we use all kinds of tasks. Here is one of the first tasks that we use. Evaluative priming is the name of the task, and this is how it goes. So if you're the participant, you're supposed to categorize the words as good words or bad words, and you're supposed to ignore the photos. The photos appear for 250 milliseconds. And in this task, what we do, we measure the automatic preference between, do you recognize the people? Ben Affleck and Eddie Murphy. So our participants, for instance, they showed an automatic preference for Ben Affleck over Eddie Murphy, which means that they were faster to categorize good words after seeing a photo of Ben Affleck and bad words after seeing photos of Eddie Murphy than categorizing good words after seeing photos of Eddie Murphy and bad words after seeing photos of Ben Affleck. And these are the actual results that we have. So people generally are faster in categorizing positive nouns than negative nouns, and that's what you see here. But when they have a positive noun that they need to categorize, it's easier for them to categorize in our sample. It's easier for them to categorize the positive noun after seeing a photo of Ben Affleck than after seeing a photo of Eddie Murphy. And if they see a negative noun, it's easier for them to categorize the noun after seeing a photo of Eddie Murphy than Ben Affleck. And if you look at the effect, it's only 13 milliseconds. And it's a reliable effect, statistically reliable. We also replicated that. And that's here as an example for the fact that we can run those kind of studies online and we can get reliable results with those kind of studies. And I will get back to this actual study later. Right now, I'm just trying to show you some of the tasks that we're using. This is a more well-known task for measuring automatic judgment. It's called the IAT, the Implicit Association Test. How many people have experienced? Okay, that's good. So this is how it works. This time we categorize we categorize stimuli to 4 different categories, but we have only 2 keys. So 2 categories have to share 1 key, and 2 other categories have to share the other key. In this case, you see one of the 2 conditions. Participants need to use the same key, the left key, in order to categorize photos of George Clooney and bad words, and use the other key to categorize good words and photos of Samuel L. Jackson. And it's easier to do that if in your memory you associate Samuel L. Jackson with good words and George Clooney with bad words. But most of our participants, it was easier for them in this condition when George Clooney and good words share the same key, and Samuel L. Jackson and bad words share the other key. Here you see a much larger effect. This is the average response latency of our participants in one of the samples that we tested it. And we tend to think about it as an automatic preference for George Clooney over Samuel L. Jackson. Now, I saw that many of you have experienced completing the IAT, and perhaps you did that on this website, implicit.harvard.edu. And it didn't start right from the beginning, but what you can do in this website is that you can experience a few demo IATs, a few demo studies, and many people have done that. Since 1998, I wasn't around back then. Well, I was alive, but I didn't think about studying psychology back then. And the person who created this website is Brian Osek. Some of you might have heard of him, but so this was one of his first projects. And he was a student of Mazarin Banachi, who was a student of Anthony Greenwald, who is the person who invented the IIT. Now, Brian Nosek had a problem. His problem was that he was a PhD student at Yale, and one of the problems there is that there are not many undergrads. And when you don't have many undergrads, it's difficult to have enough participants in your studies. And he had a minor in computer science, so he thought, let's create a website, perhaps I'll get a few hundred participants. So he created that website. It didn't look like that. It looked a little bit worse. And then the IIT became very, very well known. So here you can see an old story from Dateline with Mazarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald telling the public about the IIT. And here's a more recent interview with Anderson Cooper. And the point is that the IIT is famous and that many people hear about the IIT, many people experience the IIT, even cognitive psychologists have experienced IIT in their past. And you can look at this graph. If you only look at the blue dot, that's the number of completed study sessions in the demo website. People come to just experience the IIT, and you can see I have data from 2008, and you can see that usually we have more than 1 million completed sessions a year. It seems like this year we're going to break our own record and perhaps get to 2.5 million study sessions. Now, the orange dots, they are completed sessions in another section in our website. So when you come to the website, you can also register in the research website, which means that you're going to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to randomly assign you to a study. And that study is a study that comes from our lab. We are a few social psychologists who maintain the website, and we also pursue more knowledge about implicit social cognition, about the IIT and other measures, and we post our studies online in the research website. And you can see here, we have sometimes about 500,000 completed sessions, and it means that most days we have at least 1,000 completed sessions. And I have been using this website since I started my PhD in 2005, and it's a lot of fun to have that many participants. Well, that's our environment of how we create the studies. I can talk more about it later, I guess, after my talk. But we had to develop our own technology in order to run studies because we were among the first who done that. And I'm going to show you a couple of projects from my lab and then a few other projects very, very quickly. So one of the questions that we have, if we think about automatic judgment, is what happens when I judge a single person, a certain person. I see someone, I want to judge them many times based on their own qualities. I don't want to judge them based on their group affiliation, but perhaps automatically I do. That's one of the basic questions in social psychology. Does the group affiliation of a person that I judge, does it influence my judgment of them, and especially automatic judgment? So this is research by my student, Maya Navon, and she's studying this question in many different ways, and I'm going to show you only one of those. And in this case, she's interested in the case in which the people are known, well known. So we chose a few movie stars, and each of our participants, they get one white movie star and one black movie star, and we try to measure their deliberate judgment, which means the non-automatic judgment, and also the automatic judgment of those two movie stars. So we ask people, how much do you like one of those people? Let's say George Clooney. How much do you like Samuel L. Jackson? And what we get, what you see here is the 19 first studies that we conducted, each one with different pair of a white movie star and a black movie star. And this is simply the effect size. And a negative effect size is a preference for the black movie star over the white movie star. And that's what we got in most of our studies. It wasn't a surprise. That's how we chose those movie stars. We went to another website that shows approval ratings of famous people, and we chose black movie stars that are very, very much liked and are also very known, and also a few movie stars, white movie stars that are liked, but not as much. And so we expected those results. We expected people to tell us that they prefer the black movie star over the white movie star. We also asked our participants to rate the photos that we're going to use in the indirect measures that I showed you earlier, and they rated how positive or negative they feel when they see each of those photos. And again, even from just looking at the photos rating, usually in most of the studies, we found a preference, a self-reported preference for the photos of the black movie star over the photos of the white movie star. And now the results of the automatic preference measurement. And what we see here is a different picture. Often we saw an automatic preference for the white movie star over the black movie star, sometimes no preference at all. And the only time that a black movie star was automatically preferred over a white movie star was Will Smith versus Johnny Depp. So our conclusion for our study is that Will Smith is really very much liked, and we hope to publish that in the best journal that we can find. But even in that case, the deliberate preference, what people reported for Will Smith over Johnny Depp, was much stronger. So even Will Smith cannot escape automatic prejudice. That's one way to put it. Now, the reason that I chose this project is that we started that in April this year. So we first ran a bunch of studies with a few thousand participants just to see whether the basic findings replicate. Then we also replicated that with another measurement of automatic judgment, and we also had a couple of studies in which we looked into moderators of this finding. And then we thought, well, perhaps let's not run it only in one sample, not only Project Implicit. So we also ran that on Prolific with a non-American sample and tested some more mediators. And then we also ran that in Israel with another website with Israeli participants. They also know those movie stars, so they showed the same effect. But we also tested that with different social groups, so not black people, white people, but old people, young people. It seems that what we find usually is that there is an automatic preference for young people over old people. So we chose this time an old movie star that people like very much, and a young movie star that people just like, but not very much. And we find the same result. People show automatic preference for the young movie star over the old movie star. And as I said, we started this project in April, and we already know a lot about it. We feel very confident that the effect is, let's say, real, that we can replicate it again and again. We feel pretty confident that it replicates with different stimuli. We also know something about the moderators and the mediators, which I did not discuss here. And my message here, I think, is that it's a lot of fun. Like in our lab, we try to study stuff. We try to understand human behavior a little bit more. But what we can do pretty more easily than find answers to our questions is to have fun. And that's what we are trying to do, to discover answers to our questions. And we can really do that with web studies very, very quickly. Let me show you another example, and another example for a study that we failed to run in the lab, but were able to run over the internet. And in this case, we wanted to test a lot of different indirect measures of automatic judgment. There are a bunch of those. And what we wanted to do is to compare them, to see the psychometric qualities, like which measure is more reliable than others, which is more valid, and also to see whether they all load on the same construct, load on the same factor in a factor analysis, because that will help us validate the theoretical construct, which is automatic judgment, and also validate those measures. So we wanted our participants to complete 7 different measures that were developed to measure automatic judgment about race, white people, black people, politics, Republicans versus Democrats, and also the self. So we can measure attitude about the self, which is self-esteem, self versus other. And we also had a bunch of measures that were developed to measure deliberate judgment. And the issue here is that we had many, many different measures. When the study first ran in the lab, it was simply impossible. Participants came back to more and more sessions, but the data wasn't that good, simply because it's very difficult to complete a lot of those tasks one after the other. So what we did, we decided to plan for missing data design, which means that each of our participants is not going to complete all of the measures, but only some of the measures. But if we have enough participants, we can still use that data for what we wanted to do with the data. And so we collected more than 24,000 participants, and each of them completed only a few of the measures. They were able to come back and complete more and more sessions, and they were always randomly assigned to the measures. So sometimes they repeated the same measure, which is a good thing for us because we want to also have a test-retest reliability. And that data set proved to be very, very useful. So at first, we published a comparison of the different measures of automatic judgment, the test-retest reliability, internal consistency, and relationship with other measures, and that's pretty useful for many people who want to choose the best automatic judgment measure for their own research. Then we also conducted, with the help of Michelangelo Vianello, who knows how to conduct that kind of analysis, a kind of factor analysis. It's if you ever heard of a multi-trait, multi-method design. It's a design that I think was suggested by Kronbach and Fisk like more than 50 years ago, and it's a way in which you use many different measures, measuring many different. And this time, originally it was traits. Here it's attitudes, and you try to provide evidence about the convergent validity of the different measures and the discriminant validity. And today you do that with structural equation modeling, and that's what we did. We indeed found that the measures that were developed to measure automatic judgment, they indeed load on the same factor, and the measures that were developed to measure deliberate judgment load on the other factor. So when you validate measures, in this case, you also validate the theory that says that those theoretical constructs exist and that they are different, deliberate judgment and automatic judgment. Now, as I said, this dataset was used a few times in a few different lines of research. So one thing that we do sometimes with the datasets that we have in Project Implicit is we try to improve the way that we score those tasks. Those tasks have a lot of different trials. Participants complete a bunch of trials every time they complete this task, and there are many different ways to compute one score that is supposed to reflect automatic judgment. So one of the most highly cited papers in social psychology is the one you see at the top. It's the one that empirically tested how to score the IIT, and it used data sets from our website. And each time someone uses the IIT, usually they use the findings from that paper. And the other three papers that you see here use the data set that I showed you earlier, the multi-measures data set, and they try to improve the scoring algorithm of the IIT and also find the best scoring algorithm for other measures as well. And that brings me to another effort that we're making in Project Implicit of making our data sets available. So I guess some of you recognize this website. It's the OSF, the next project of Brian Osbeck. And what we do, we post all those millions of participants, those millions of completed sessions that I showed you earlier in the graph. We post them online, and people then use them in their own research. I have a couple of examples for that. So what they do sometimes, they look at communities, at counties in the United States. So a few of our participants, we always let them tell us where they are. Just put your zip code, and then we know where they are, which means that we can use our data to compute the average IIT score in a certain county. And then you can analyze data on the level of the county. And you can take that data and other data sets that have other information about the county and see whether there is any relationship. So, for instance, one of the studies, this one, found a relationship between the average IIT score in the county level and the disproportionate use of lethal force with blacks. That's what they say here. But it's really just the likelihood that if you're a black person in that county, what's the likelihood that a police officer is going to shoot you? And it seems that it is related to the average IIT score that we collect on the website. Just to make it clear, it's not the same participants, right? I mean, the police officers might not be the people who complete the IIT in that county, but we can think of that county as a sample of people from that place, and their IIT score reflects something that is related to the probability of a black person to get shot by a police officer in that community. And there's another research. There's a bunch of those, but just another example. It's they found that the IIT score, again in the white versus black people IIT, it is related to negative health outcomes of newborns, of black newborns. So it is related to the percent of preterm birth among black people, and also the percent of low birth weight. And that might tell us something about the importance of whatever is measured with the IIT, but the role that it might play in the society that is tested here is the American society, but probably it's the same all over the world. Okay, so I was pretty quick, and I can also provide a summary of what I learned from running all those studies, well, some of those studies. One thing is that it seems to me, running studies in the lab and online, it seems to me that measurement and manipulation work not worse than they work in the lab, which means it's not that they work great, but it's just that in the lab as well, many of those measures, the participants are not always well behaved. So I couldn't see any difference between running our studies online and in the lab. And it's easier to get a large sample. It's easier to set up. You just, you don't need experimenters. You don't need lab space. You don't need to coordinate anything after you have the technology. And we can gain confidence pretty fast in our findings, which is very, very rewarding. And that's really my lesson. I remember as a grad student, I used to look at my data every day because that's the best thing that anyone can do, looking at data. And it was so much fun getting hundreds of participants every day. And I really think that's the main motivation for using the web for studies, because it's just so much more fun. But I have to say, we do replicate most of our findings in the lab, and there are various reasons for that. One reason is that reviewers at the beginning, like more than 10 years ago, they used to, more than 10 years ago, they really didn't like it when you have a paper that has only web studies. This has changed. Like, you cannot have this kind of workshop in social psychology today because so many social psychologists are using the web already. But still, it remained with me. So I still feel more confident in my findings if I also replicate that in the lab. And also, there are many things that you cannot run online, as Josh said earlier. And also, I have an obligation for my students. I feel like I cannot have my students run only web studies. It seems to me that it's very easy for students. Students really like that because they can run the research very, very quickly. They don't have to see any participants ever, which is fun for many of them. But I think that it's very important for their education to also be able to run studies in the lab. One thing that I guess will be mentioned here a few times in the workshop is about the limited precision that you have when you run web studies. In most technologies, the timing of displaying stimuli is not as accurate as in the lab, and also the measurement of the response latency is not as accurate as in the lab. And I can only say that I have not seen ever any evidence that it somehow harms our ability to find effects. Like, it makes sense, right? It makes sense that it will, because the measurement is less reliable, but I just never seen any, there was never ever an effect that we could find in the lab but could not find online. That's it.
All right, thanks. We'll just keep rolling. We have to get Sam's stuff. Okay. All right, well, while they're setting Sam up, does anybody have any questions for Yoav? I think you have a question over there.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. I was curious about the idea about the plans.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
And I guess we were kind of trying to structure in general across people and saying, like, okay, sample. I'm wondering if instead you were trying to do individual or some the other way, that you knew you weren't going to get all of your measures. Maybe you could have planned missing data now that same.
Yeah. I mean, usually you can. Usually you can. You can use imputation, which means that you complete the missing data, but you don't always have to do that. You only need enough participants. So every time we were curious about certain relationships between variables, we always had hundreds of participants to complete it for measures. So it was always, we never had a missing cell in our study.
Any other questions?
What level in milliseconds of accuracy do you sometimes have to deliver an image online for studies like this, and then see when it collects it? What down to what level of precision and accuracy do you need in timing?
So not much. Like, sometimes when we, I mean, it's just an empirical answer. This is the one that I have. And sometimes the accuracy in some browsers is very low. It's like you can miss it in about 20 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds, like two refresh rates, refresh screens. Still, we don't find that with those configurations, the configurations that we know that do not work as precise as other configurations, like Chrome is better than Microsoft, obviously, but you don't find any difference between those configurations. So that's why we don't have evidence. We never could find any evidence that counts the quality of the data.
The Jerome is stuck looking.
No.
It's okay. So we have to use the web then. All right. Right. Now next question. It's okay to put it. Oh, you want to put it first?
Using these techniques to explore the design space. So instead of you sort of a priori defining the experiment stimuli, you sort of adaptively figure out what stimuli, which person would evoke the strongest response.
So that's something we did with the Israeli sample. We did not decide at the beginning what actors we're going to use. We first let the participants rate those people, and then we chose it according to what we chose the people that we thought would be the most informative for us, the stimuli that's going to be most informative according to the participants. That's the most sophisticated thing that we have done, but not more than that.